a little trip with me, and hopefully you can see how the hood, suburbs, and Main Street are all connected. Enough respect, we network across the globe, cause it's a global market in case you didn't know. And since we all about information flow, let me be the first one to welcome you to Tech Zone with Paul Amadeus Lane. Let's talk tech, cause technology changing the game. It's all good in the hood, it's everywhere. Now let's get to the show, cause we live on air, yeah.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Tech Zone. I am Paul Amadeus Lane, and I'm so happy to have you here on this edition. Why am I so happy? We're just a few months away from the Consumer Electronics Show, CES 2017. We'll be broadcasting live from there again for the 6th straight year, so you don't want to miss that. Make sure you keep following me on social media as we, we'll talk about some of the guests we're going to have on, and we're going to be having some of the Consumer Technology Association heavyweights join us on the show leading up to CES 2017. I am so excited for the show today. We only have 2 segments because we have 2 fantastic guests who have a lot of information that they are going to share with us. So sit back and enjoy the ride today. Coming up in our second segment, we're going to be joined by one of the most powerful women in business. She's going to talk about her journey, talk about her new book, talk about the struggles she had becoming one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley. So that interview you do not want to miss. But now, we're going to talk about cybersecurity. How secure is the healthcare industry? We know in the election cycle, a lot have been made about cybersecurity, things being hacked. Folks, this is real. It's nothing funny about what happens when someone is attacked, cybersecurity. What if I were to tell you that healthcare ranks about 15 out of 18 in social engineering, and how there are serious threats out there to your personal information? What would you say? Well, my next guest is going to join me and talk about just how vulnerable the healthcare industry is when it comes to cyber attacks, and also some things that companies can do to protect themselves. Sam Kassoumeh joins me from SecurityScorecard. Remember, we had him on earlier in the year and we talked to another representative, but now we have the COO and co-founder himself of SecurityScorecard. Sam, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. And I kind of talked to the audience about this before we brought you on, and it is staggering of how much we are in a heightened sense of security when it comes to cyber security now. Did you ever think we would get to this point?
I never thought it would reach this point. I've been working in cybersecurity my entire life, and it always used to be something that was on the back burner of technology. It was an afterthought. Now, fast forward 15, 20 years, and it's on the forefront of everybody's mind.
That is so true. And especially when it comes to the healthcare industry. Your company just put out a report, and I read over the report, and I am just stunned. I'm just shocked. And for our viewers and listeners out there, talk about some of the highlights of that report that talks about the vulnerabilities when it comes to our information.
Absolutely. And I encourage, if anybody wants to take a look at the report more closely, they can visit SecurityScorecard.com. And right at the top of the page, there's a link to enter information and download the healthcare report. So about once a quarter, every quarter, we release a report on a different industry. We've looked at finance. Next quarter, we're looking at retail. But this quarter, we looked at healthcare. And healthcare has some very staggering and concerning observations and statistics that we've seen with regards to information security. Healthcare, obviously a big concern because it's storing very sensitive information about individuals, human beings, their lives, their medical history, their problems that they're going to the doctor for, social security and payment information. So when we think about healthcare, it's a little bit different than financial or retail in that it has such a broad spectrum of information that they're storing. They're storing your personal information about who you are and where you live, your financial information, as well as your medical information. What we're seeing in the healthcare industry, a few examples of things that we're seeing in the healthcare industry. One thing that we've noticed is within healthcare, there's a extremely high volume of software that's being used at hospitals and healthcare organizations that are out of date. These are systems like Windows XP, for example. Now, why is that such a big deal if somebody is using some out-of-date software? Well, the manufacturers no longer support that software. So if you're running Windows XP, Microsoft isn't giving you security updates or patches. And what does that mean? That means that system is permanently insecure and vulnerable to an attack. And that's just one example.
You know, I'm glad you said that because I remember when Microsoft said that when they weren't going to service XP, and you know, for us in audio and the video industry, we loved XP because it worked so well with some of the audio and video programs, and some of us were like kind of, you know, dinosaurs when it came to that. And then when Microsoft said that, some of us didn't realize just the damage it would do because some of us got hit with viruses, we got hit with a lot of things. And I'm glad you said that. So it's good to always upgrade your operating system because the manufacturers will service it when it comes to security patches. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. If you're up to date, you can get the latest patches. But you know, and audiovisual guys, you're not the only ones that like Windows XP. Apparently, hospitals and other industries like to use Windows XP, but for a different reason. They've installed some software, maybe a database that houses everybody's payment information, and that system is running fine. Over the years, the system is running so good that people are afraid to update it. They're afraid to touch it because it's become such a critical piece of infrastructure, and they don't want to take it down because there could be costs implicated with that. So oftentimes companies feel more comfortable leaving a system alone to continue operating the way it's been working for 20 years instead of upgrading it to the newest technology. And that's good. If the system's been running for 20 years, that's great. It means it's stable. But what's not good is that it's not being patched. New security vulnerabilities are being discovered daily by hackers and security researchers, which means that the systems that we use today may not be secure tomorrow, and we have to stay at the forefront of those patches. Always we see that companies have to sacrifice a little bit of convenience for security, which means that we have to spend time upgrading the operating systems out of Windows XP, for example, to make sure it's more secure. But that's not as convenient as just letting it run and continue doing its job. And that's always the challenge that any companies in any industries face. Do we invest in something that's inconvenient but more secure, or do we just leave it as is, leave the status quo?
Well said. And as we comb through the report, and this blew me away right here, Sam. Over 75% of the entire healthcare industry has been infected with malware over last year. Now, I know what malware is. Some of our viewers and listeners may not be familiar with malware because sometimes they're business owners and they leave it to the other people to run the business and they don't really understand what malware. Can you explain what malware is, please? Malware
is like a virus. That's the easiest way to translate it. So you think about a virus that infects your machine. How do we get viruses? How do we get malware? Maybe we get an email address. We get an email from somebody that we think we know with a link in it that looks normal. And we click that link, right? We want to click the link or open the attachment, and nothing happens. Maybe it loads a web page. There's no information, or we keep double clicking this file that's attached, but it's not opening. Well, what we don't realize is behind the scenes, there's a very malware is malicious software. There's a piece of malicious software, a virus, that's behind the scenes infecting the computer. Now, what happens after a computer is infected with malware? Well, oftentimes that computer is now in control of a bad guy, and that bad guy can send commands to that computer to get it to do whatever it wants. It can harvest the information off of the computer. It can tell the virus, scan all the files on the computer and send them back to me, which means sensitive information can be leaked out. It can use that computer in an attack. So when we see things like DDoS attacks taking place, which we hear a lot about in the media, where are those attacks coming from? A lot of times they're coming from infected machines. The hospital doesn't know that it's happening, but the bad guy is controlling the machine like a zombie and telling it to go launch an attack. Other times, we see commands telling the computers to go infect more computers.
Wow.
So it's sort of what you can think of it sort of like land and expand.
Mm-hmm.
One computer inside of a network gets infected, then that computer goes and infects 10 more computers, then those 10 computers go and infect hundreds more computers. And this gives the hacker the ability to take over the network if they so choose, starting with just one computer.
Wow. I'm, and it's staggering. It really is. And when ones are infected by this, we as the consumer, we may not know about it, but are there any under obligation to let their patients or their clients know that, hey, we've been hit and your information may be compromised, or do they kind of keep it hushed and see if they can get it under control and then do damage control later?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because they're not necessarily under obligation to disclose that a malware infection has occurred because it's such a common occurrence, and oftentimes understanding the consequence takes time. When a malware infection takes place, we don't always know if sensitive information has been leaked or if anything is, nefarious is taking place. It could just be that the computer's infected and it's sitting dormant for now. So generally, companies are not under any type of legal obligation to disclose something as commonplace as a malware infection until something more severe takes place. Now, with that being said, a good company will have strong incident response procedures so that they know what to do when a computer is infected. We no longer live in an environment where we're wondering, will I ever, if I get hacked, what am I going to do about it? We're not thinking about if I get hacked, what's going to happen. Companies are now, it's a bit of a paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. They're thinking, when I get hacked, I know it's going to happen. Something's going to happen. Somebody's going to have access to my network, whether it's through malware, whether it's through Internet of Things, which we can talk about more. Somebody is going to gain unauthorized access to my network or to my files. When that happens, what do I do about it? And that's the most important question anybody can ask. Do they have a playbook that sequences step by step how we're going to respond when bad things take place? And unfortunately, most often than not, companies have this strategy on paper, but they're not practicing it. You have to practice it. You have to run exercises let's pretend a computer is infected with malware. When that happens, who do I pick up the phone and call? And do they know what to do? It's all about having those guidelines in place. And just like anything else, practice makes perfect.
And Sam, a term that we got kind of familiarized with over the last year or so was ransomware. The public has been privy to that term, ransomware. Mm-hmm. And in the report, it talked about 96% of all ransomware affecting the healthcare industry targeted medical treatment centers. Why do you think that was the case? Was it more sensitive information, or because those may be high dollar procedures in there that it was hit? What was the reason behind that you guys found out?
It's a very good question. Let's think about how ransomware works, right? Ransomware is a type of virus, it's a type of infection that encrypts all of the sensitive information on a computer. It basically locks a computer. It bricks it. So nothing can be done on that computer unless you pay a ransom. So the hacker is asking you to pay money in order to unlock those encrypted files on the computer. So it's all about, when it comes to ransomware, it's a bit of psychology. It's all about asking ourselves, how critical is the information that's being locked, encrypted, and how urgent is the decryption? If we're talking about locking super sensitive computers and processes like medical systems or credit card transactional systems, those are types of systems that transact probably millions of queries a day. And when those systems go down, there's an immediate impact, right? Companies, hospitals, healthcare systems, or in the case of financial processing, a bank, they could lose millions of dollars a day or even millions of dollars a minute.
Wow.
If those systems are locked. So by targeting those types of systems, the critical infrastructure that transacts hundreds or millions of queries a day, hackers are able to generate a sense of urgency in paying. When ransomware attacks, the first thought that goes through the victim's head is, let's just pay it. Let's just pay it so I can go back to normal. That's what they view as the path of least resistance. If you lock somebody's home PC, where they're, it's their gaming station, they may not be willing to pay. They may say, let me just go buy a new computer because that might be cheaper. But when you lock the critical systems, medical treatment systems or systems of that nature, that's oftentimes the first response is not let's call incident response, not let's call our general counsel, not let's call the security team. It's like, let's just pay it to get this over with.
And it seems like the ransomers, they know that, and that's why they do that, because you bring up a very good point, because when I first heard about it last year and before, I was like, well, just call the authorities right away, the FBI, they can get them, but that takes time. By that time, a person's business can be bankrupt. So
that's right.
So that they know this, and this is just it's mind-boggling where we're at. But I'm glad organizations like yourself are out there, giving these reports out there so that industries, especially the healthcare industry, can see what they need to do to not only protect their bottom line, but protect us who are their patients and their consumers. And we definitely applaud you when it comes to. Now, we mentioned briefly the Internet of Things. Let's talk about that and how that if that contributes to the problem that we're having in the security aspect when it comes to healthcare.
Yep. Internet of Things is a hot topic today. Internet of Things, or IoT, it's a term used to describe all of the various discrete devices that now have an internet connection. Refrigerators, toasters. I've even heard now they have light bulbs that have that have Wi-Fi. They have an internet connection. Why do they need that? What's the point of hooking all of these devices to the internet? Well, it gives us more control.
And we're lazy. We're lazy. That's why.
We're lazy. I want the lights to be home when I get home. I don't want to have to flip the switch.
Absolutely.
I want, the food to be heated when I get home, so I don't have to turn the knob, turn on the microwave.
Absolutely.
Now, what does that mean? That means that because they have an internet connection, somebody potentially can remotely connect into these devices and use it as a jumping point into a network. Now let's talk about how does this translate to healthcare, right? Where do Internet of Things come into play? Well, a few ways. Oftentimes, medical devices that are manufactured by healthcare companies have an internet connection. Now that's quite scary because these devices sometimes are hooked up to human bodies. And unfortunately, these devices are not built with security in mind. Security is still viewed as an afterthought. So oftentimes, hospitals buy these, injection pumps or other types of hardware that are connected to the internet. Touchpads that have everybody's medical history, um, and they're developed in a way that's inherently insecure. There's no security controls built into these devices. That means hackers have free reign to connect to these devices and do some serious damage. Another type of IoT device that we see very common in hospitals and within healthcare are label makers. Now, this is probably, if you were to ask people what's the most malicious piece of hardware inside of a hospital, the last guess you would have is a label maker.
Yeah.
But what we've observed is, these little zebra or P-touch label makers, right? Why are they such a threat? Well, why are they used? When people get admitted to the hospital or to the ER, you get a bracelet, right? Little identifier with your name and the barcode. Those bracelets are printed through a remote label maker that has access to your medical information. Now, we see dozens and dozens, sometimes hundreds of these label makers within hospitals' environments. These label makers are inherently insecure. As soon as you connect one of these label makers to the internet, it's not just connected within the four walls of the hospital, but it's broadcasting its connection over the entire public internet. That means anybody, you and I, can sit at home and we can connect directly to these label makers inside of a hospital's network with no username, no password. Now, what's the threat of that? What does that mean? That means that we can do a couple of things. We can configure these label makers to do things that they were never intended to do. We can relay and route traffic or viruses through these label makers. We can also use them as a jumping point to get into a more restricted area of the hospital's network, all through such a seemingly innocent device.
Wow. Who would have thunk it, right? That little device right there. And, one of the things, too, that really intrigued me about the report, too, was that the lack of awareness, security awareness that personnel have when it comes to cybersecurity. And so do you think that more companies need to have classes about this, training? What can help the personnel to see, hey, there's a threat out there, so you want to make sure that you cover yourself?
That's a good question. I absolutely agree with you. People do need more training, not just in healthcare, but across almost every industry. Social engineering, the ability to trick people into clicking a link or giving up some sensitive information, tops the list in terms of security risk. Why is that the case? Well, oftentimes in organizations, employees are trusted with classified or highly sensitive information, but they're not trained on the operating procedures to handle this information. They're not told the do's and the don'ts. And even if they are, it's buried, on page 57 of the super thick employee manual. It's not repeated, so as quickly as an employee reads it, they forget it. You always hear this excuse with organizations. Companies say, I don't have enough budget for information security, and that's why our security is so poor. But guess what? Security training, security awareness is free. People are always going to be the weakest link. So as you alluded to, building security programs, building educational materials, PowerPoints, simple pictures, 3 steps to remember and create a secure password. These free or inexpensive techniques go a longer way in securing information than the super expensive $250,000 sophisticated detection and alerting systems that they already have in place. By educating, and it's more important now to educate employees than ever because we have a distributed workforce, which is something that another kind of paradigm shift that we've seen take place over the last 10 years. Employees are no longer tied to their desk and this huge desktop machine. They carry around their computer every day and their backpack and their car, even their mobile phone in their pocket. They're doing work off of through various mobile apps. All of these devices can act as an entry point for a hacker. So you don't start by securing the device. You start by securing the person operating the device.
Yes.
Teach them best practices. And then you have an entire company who's embracing the culture of information security. And what that does is it allows employees to hold each other mutually accountable for security best practices, because they know at the end of the day that they're responsible for the security of their customers as much as the system is responsible for having the right security configurations.
Sam, we can talk about this for hours, my friend, but unfortunately we are running out of time. But we'd love to have you guys back on again to talk about various reports that you guys have coming up. We know that you guys did one on health industry right now, and I think you mentioned of what's the next report going to be on?
The next report coming up is going to be on the retail industry. So retail industry is always a hot topic because they process a large volume of credit card transactions. Every store has a brick and mortar and a website now, and you have a high volume of fraud taking place. So we'll talk a little bit about that next quarter. Yeah, and Paul, I enjoyed our conversation. Happy to come back anytime and talk security with you.
Hey, we'll do it, my friend. And one more time, I know everyone's intrigued by what we talked about, because there's a lot more that we didn't get a chance to discuss. Give that website out again, how ones can check out this report, because I think everyone should take a look at it.
Anybody and everybody has access to the healthcare report. SecurityScorecard.com. One word, SecurityScorecard.com. Right at the top of the page, there's a banner. Get the 2016 healthcare report now. Click that link, and you'll get access to the PDF with all of the metrics that we discussed, plus more.
Sam, you have a great day, my friend, and you guys keep up the good work, because I think you guys are really helping ones be aware of the threats that are out there, and it's real threats, and we need to do something about it to make sure that businesses are educated, also employees and others are really educated on what's going on out there.
Thank you, Paul. That's our goal, is to de-risk security from every organization, so that customers' information is secure, healthcare information is secure, so that all of us can feel good about trusting the companies that we do business with.
It sounds good. Okay, my friend, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Paul. We'll talk to you soon.
Once again, I'd like to thank Sam Kassoumeh for joining us. Fascinating information. Security Scorecard. Make sure you check out that report. The healthcare industry, it will blow your mind. We only scratched the surface. Definitely check it out. We look forward to having him back on and discuss cybersecurity issues. Don't forget, connect with me, paulonwheels.com, paulonwheels.com. That's how you can follow me on all social media. And thank you so much. Our YouTube channel is expanding. Thank you guys so much for all your support and your comments. Look forward to connecting with you. Many more out there. Yes, we do. When we get back, we'll be talking to one of the most powerful women in the tech industry, joining us, talking about her new book. And don't want to miss that. We'll be right back here on the Tech Zone. I am Paul Amadeus Lane. Sean, get me off this crazy thing, man.